Alright everyone, and this is not a black-pilled channel. You all know this if you've been subscribed for more than a couple of days. That being said, I'm worried about a war with Iran actually looming, like between the US and Iran. It's now clear that the Iranians are going to retaliate against the Israelis. Hezbollah is already doing so. There were rocket attacks overnight. Of course, Iron Dome can take care of a few rockets or drones. It's not really a problem for that defense system. But if you get Hezbollah and Iran and maybe the Houthis all joining in on the fray at the same time, it's going to be a bit more difficult to prevent civilian casualties. The United States government's position has generally been unequivocally pro-Israel. It's been more tempered in recent years, but it's still it's a pro-Netanyahu policy effectively. If Israel gets slamma-jammed, and I worry that this might actually happen this time around, the last engagement was basically a couple of feints. If that does happen, my worry is that the United States gets dragged into a war with Iran. That's exactly what we don't want right now. That's a terrible idea. Number one, supposedly Iran is days away from completing atomic weapons program. We got that from the Secretary of State, I believe it was about a week ago. Oh, they're like 2 weeks away from perfecting a bomb. Well, you don't want to go to a war with a nation that has atomic weapons. That's not a good idea, generally, unless you have to. Number two, it would be terrible if the United States were to get into it with Iran and then all of a sudden things pop off with Russia. I guess in D.C. some of their leadership is like, well, they're distracted in Ukraine right now. That war is basically at stalemate levels. Well, if they're all directing their force at Ukraine, and they're trying to take that territory, maybe they can't back up their allies down there in Central Asia, so maybe it's time to go to war with Iran. No Iranian ever fucked me over, just to be clear, or Russian or Ukrainian or anything else under the sun. The only people who've fucked me over have been Americans, actually. Very, very telling. It's a microcosm of sociopolitics. Your own government can fuck you over legally. Foreign governments have to fuck you over through military endeavors or, some sort of subversion, spy versus spy mode. People should probably keep this in mind a lot more, and if everyone else kept it in mind around the world, people would mind their own business a lot more and there'd be a lot less wars going on. That being said, going to war with Iran is not really a practical solution to anything. You'll destabilize the region, and not just Iran, probably causing regional conflict. Now, it looks like the regional conflict may unfortunately have already begun. Also, there's another problem, and this is one that doesn't get talked about very much. It's not sociopolitical, it's actually spiritual. The problem is that there are a lot of people in the world, various Christians, certain Jewish sects, certainly Islamic sects, that think that if a regional war breaks out there, it could be the end of the world. When people think the world is ending, what do? Do they act normal, or do they act abnormal? Unfortunately, the latter, and they can get very violent over this as well. Do you really want chaos spilling out into the streets in urban communities in the United States? Because if this pops off, there are going to be Islamists and Jews and Christians and shit brawling in the streets. We've already seen some of this. Hell, you just have a localized war, and it already begins. We've already got it happening right now. And it's not just in the United States either. It's in certain pockets in Europe as well. You want to see things pop off, either burn a red heifer at the base of the Temple Mount or have a war with Iran. That's not a good idea. And by the way, people are being too flippant about war in general, not just with Iran, but with anyone in the world. These are actual human beings. They're your fellow species. Well, the only species that engages in such behavior. If we had been descended from a common ancestor with bonobos instead of chimpanzees, you know how we would solve large-scale conflicts? We would have orgies. That sounds like a better world to me. Just saying, that would probably be a good idea. Our soldiers and your soldiers are going to fuck. Okay. Who wins? A person who can fuck the most, basically. Instead of having somebody who gets 50 kills, sniping, and he gets a Medal of Valor, He's like, I fucked 14 chicks and a couple dudes and maybe a cow, but I was drunk and I don't remember. That would be a better world. Maybe a more perverted one, but yeah, we're all perverts anyway. Unfortunately, and I'm not trying to be flippant because this could be a big problem. Unfortunately, there may be a regional war that's going to erupt in the Middle East. Again, not a black pill channel. I'm not claiming that there's going to be a nuclear war or anything like that. I personally do not believe Iran has the bomb. Blinken can say that, Kirby can say that, and people have been saying that since like 1990. The Israelis and the Clinton administration was warning about it. Well, they're 6 months away from getting the bomb. Well, 6 months passed and they never blew anything up. So if they do have atomic weapons, they're being restrained with them. That's a normal state actor, by the way. I'm worried, though, that there's going to be a large-scale incursion here. And it looks like Iran is really drawing up to rattle the swords, and I think they're going to do more than rattle them. Hezbollah attacks are one thing. The Israelis will just conduct a couple of air raids and call it a day. Iran is a state actor. The hope is that they respond the same way they did a couple of months ago. So the Israelis and the Iranians got into it, but it was just, basically an empty threat. So they basically like, we hate you, we're going to bomb you. And then they send some drones and Iron Dome takes them down, and it's not really a problem. They were all last gen anyway, and it wasn't really a threat to Israel. 99% of the munitions were completely destroyed by Iron Dome system. The Israeli attacks on Iran, they didn't do much damage. It was basically just a couple of basic bitch raids, and then they called it a day. My hope is that the same thing happens now. But that's not necessarily this time, and I expected that before, but I don't necessarily expect it now. The risk of a regional war is escalating day by day. At some point, diplomacy has to break through, and unfortunately, the United States, which normally would broker such a deal, is currently run by complete mad people. They're madmen and madwomen. I mean, just look at Kamala Harris. Does anyone really think that she's sane? Hell, I don't even think that the liberals think that she's sane. They just cheer her on because they don't want to be racist or sexist, or they don't want to sound like they're plotting Orange Man. If you don't stand behind our Iron Lady, it means that you like the Big Don, the Orange Man, and he's bad because, he didn't start wars. Yeah. I wish we had that sort of leadership in D.C. right now. That's about all. Peace out.